Okay, well, welcome to Mining Now, and we're live from the trade show at PDAC. My name's Roy Slack, and I'm your host today. And today I'm speaking with Lori Wickert and Sahiba.
Sachdeva.
Thank you. You saved me there.
You got
From
it, Roy.
Descartes Labs, and thanks for joining us today.
You got it.
First of all, and I usually ask this of people is I'm interested in your backgrounds. How did you get involved in Descartes Labs and in this line of work? So, Lori, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a geologist by training. Did my undergrad at UBC, Canadian, and I started off my career working in mining for Alcan Aluminum. So I worked as a geochemist and mineralogist with them, and I got an introduction to remote sensing through the project work that I was doing with them, and I thought it was just a great opportunity and a great technology for doing exploration. And I had the opportunity to do a project with the Canada Centre for Remote Sensing, which really developed my skills. And then I did consulting for a while, and I found that I just spent a lot of time doing data correction all the time, and I wanted to be able to actually do the mapping.
Correction or collection?
Correction, data
Okay.
correction.
Corrections.
Yes. And so I was looking for an opportunity to be able to do online processing of remote sensing data, and that's what brought me to Descartes Labs. They had the compute capability to be able to do what I wanted to do, and they were actually interested in using remote sensing as an exploration tool. So they, were looking for someone who had the right background to be able to develop into that, and it was a great fit for me. So that's how I started with Descartes Labs.
Nice.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like you had a personal vision that fit.
It's absolutely the case. I had many of my colleagues who told me I was crazy and that I shouldn't, it wasn't really
We
going
have
to go
that in
in this
common.
way.
I've got a lot of. They still do.
Yeah.
But,
Call you crazy.
Well, I knew what I wanted to go for, and I went back to school to learn data science, so it would force me to learn to code, and then it opened this opportunity to work with Descartes Labs, and I jumped on it, and I said, that's what I want to do.
Excellent.
I want to bring this capability and this technology to our community and to our industry. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Your turn, Sahiba.
So my background is really just in enterprise technology in an industry agnostic way. I didn't work with the mining industry before working with Descartes Labs. And Descartes Labs, works across a number of industries, but mining is certainly a major focus for the company and has been for me at my time at the company. I've been here about 3 years now. But I joined Descartes Labs because I was trying to transition to a space where we could have an impact on our planet. And I'm really excited about our work with the mining industry, really see it as our way to, get over the world's reliance on the oil and gas industry and move towards a cleaner future. So that's really what brought me to Descartes Labs. The technology we have is so compelling and so interesting. It's definitely what gets me from my bed to my desk every morning. And working with folks like Lori, who are, like legends in their field, who are really, who are sort of embedding their brains into technology today, which is a really, really interesting and exciting place to be.
Excellent. And I'm going to get to the ESG later because that's something I usually land on. I don't know a lot about it, but I'm involved in it through the boards I'm in. So I'm going to ask you about that a little bit later. We'll get back to that. But for those of us who aren't legends in our field, what do you guys do? I just want to read you something. A technology company that automates the analysis of geospatial data. Take it from there.
I'll give you the origin story for Descartes Labs,
Okay,
if that
great.
helps. So Descartes Labs was founded over 10 years ago now by a group of scientists from the Los Alamos National Labs in New Mexico in the U.S., which folks might have heard of from the Oppenheimer movie, actually, for better or for worse. But those folks really saw that there was this rapidly growing number of sensors being launched to monitor the Earth remotely. Just satellites going up constantly, airborne collections of data of all these different types of modalities. And there just wasn't the ability to work with the data effectively, much less, get value from it. So you're in this scenario where there's actually more demand for satellite launching than there is supply of infrastructure to even do so. and what's going to happen with all of that data? People aren't able to work with it effectively. I mean, Lori and I have clients who have data sets that they've spent millions of dollars on sometimes, and it's just been sitting on a shelf for the better part of a decade. So, our founders founded the company with the idea that there needs to be infrastructure to be able to work with that kind of data effectively. And so that's really the core of our business. That's what the underlying technology is that powers everything we do. It's an incredible multi-petabyte catalog of geospatial data that's been cleaned and calibrated and made analysis ready. It's compute infrastructure that is optimized for being able to work with that kind of data effectively. We have the world's 40th most powerful supercomputer built using AWS infrastructure. And we also allow our clients to bring in their very valuable data assets as well to be able to analyze them effectively. And then we have folks like Lori and our incredible applied science team who then also do the work to say, like, okay, well, that technology is very powerful, but what's it for? Like, what good can it do in the world and for our clients? And to actually develop interfaces that are geared towards specific problems. And we have a couple of those for the mining industry, of course. We focused on mineral exploration, infrastructure monitoring, and environmental solutions.
So Lori, you had mentioned earlier about data correction, and the way I heard you talking, I'm overwhelmed with the amount of data that's probably available. That's the first problem we all have.
Yeah.
Well, some of us have, but so Lori, all of this data coming in, is the correction involved in interpretation, or is the correction involved in picking and using the right? Where does that all come in?
Well, it depends on the sensor, typically. What we're working with all kinds of geospatial data. So any data that really has an XY location associated with it, we're able to handle and bring it onto our catalog. We're very data agnostic. And, my focus as a remote sensing geologist with Descartes Labs is really about taking all kinds of sensor data. And the amount of sensor data, like Sahiba said, is just going to take off. Like I've heard numbers saying that, over the next 7 years, we're going to create as much data. Within 10 years, we will have more data, more recent data than anything collected in the time before that. It's just going to explode. And we need a way to be able to analyze all this data, like Sahiba said. And for the mineral exploration industry, we have many different data sets that are covering different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. And we need a way to be able to bring that data together and use it to provide solutions that our clients need to help address whether it's their exploration objectives or it is further along on the mining chain. So I'm focused more on the mineral exploration, but we have people that work in every part of that life cycle, for the most part. So for the data correction, typically the data, especially now, we have positional information that comes with it. We have collection information about the atmosphere when it's collected, what are the conditions for sun and for look angle and all the different positional information you need. And all of that gets taken into account in the corrections that we apply. A lot of algorithm development happens, to be able to bring that data onto the platform. And we have a lot of specialists that, work in our applied science team and our engineering team to help develop that capability. And we have, I don't know if you want me to go into the products that we have at all, but we have.
Well, you mentioned remote sensing.
Yes.
And I've got a note here that we want to talk about remote sensing because it is within mining, and it's going to segue into our ESG discussion too.
Yeah,
So.
It will. Yeah. So specifically for remote sensing for mineral exploration, we're interested in looking at mineral alteration that could be associated with a buried ore deposit. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to be able to map evidence on the surface, and it's really just on the surface, that could be associated with that. And so there's different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum that are characteristically associated with being able to differentiate different mineral compositions. So in the visible to infrared, it's iron oxides, and the shortwave infrared, it's the micas, the clays, the phyllosilicates, the carbonates. And then in the thermal part of the spectrum, which some sensors can collect the data from there as well, it's more the silicate minerals. So we basically, understand and know all this as a spectral geologist who's working with this data all the time. And our job is to, either we have different kinds of remote sensing data. We have multispectral that sort of has tens of bands associated with it. And then the new data sets are hyperspectral, which have hundreds of bands associated with them. And the difference between the two is that the multispectral data allows us to map mineral groups, and the hyperspectral data allows us to map mineral species. And so we're really delving into this new capability of hyperspectral data processing, which is, new sensors are becoming online and available largely through so far through the different space agencies, the German Space Agency, the Italian Space Agency, the US Space Agency. And there's more sensors that are going to be coming on a commercial basis as well, which is really going to be able to, map compositional differences and, really be able to use the data that's being collected by the mineral exploration industry that, as Sahiba said, has sat in the shelf for quite a long time. So it's a very exciting time. And we're making that data available to our clients in a very, very, very quick way.
So I'm trying to picture the actual physical data collection. When you talk about sensors, are these satellites? Are these what's actually collecting the data?
Yeah, so we're pretty data agnostic, but a lot of these are cameras and other kinds of sensors that are placed on satellites or drones or even on the ground sometimes. But they, will pass over a certain point on Earth every so often and take an image or even send out an active source signal and get a reflection back. But that's really what they capture and then transmit down to Earth and ends up in our
So is there a
catalog.
depository for all this information, or
There's many of them. In fact, that's the problem. There's so many of
So
them,
many?
and if they all have different benefits, and you want to be able to pick out the benefits of all of that data and make it available to yourself, and that's what we bring onto our catalog.
One of the most challenging things that happens for someone who's new in this field, and I mean, your background is, I think you said, a
I'm
mining
new.
engineer.
I am completely new in this field, I'll tell you that, Lori.
So one of my jobs is to make sure that we help educate and train and support our clients in knowing what data to use for what. That's a big part of what we do. And we help them be successful with their data choices and with the processing results that they get. So when a particular, say, a space agency, for example, collects data for a particular sensor, then they're going to manage that data archive, and then we're going to have a connection, almost a pipeline for ingesting that data that we can then correct and make it available on our website, whether it's data that's from a free source or it's something commercial that our clients will purchase and then we make it available to them. So we have all kinds of different options for data management and correction. But a big part of, like Sahiba said earlier, is for us to make the data readily accessible and can be interpreted by our clients. So we call it analysis ready. And that's it's about speed, really. It's about solutions. It's about answers.
That's
Yeah.
right, because you don't want to spend any of your time on that data correction. What you want is answers now, and
Yes.
that's really what we are trying to deliver to our
Yeah.
clients.
So tell me about who's going to talk about Marigold.
This
I
lady.
got a note here to ask about Marigold.
Okay, so Marigold is our online processing capability that we built for geologists, for mineral exploration geologists. And we want to make it so that remote sensing is easy, it's fun, it's intuitive. And once we support people in learning how to use this technology, about how to do the processing. We make it so that their information and their knowledge about a particular location is incorporated into the actual interpretation that they do. So they become the experts for their particular location. We just help them get there. And what is so great about Marigold is that because the data is analysis ready, you can literally put in an XY for every location on the world. So imagine somebody comes to you and says, "Oh, I have this great deposit." You're a project geologist or a senior geologist for a company, and this guy comes up and he says, "Oh, I've this prospector and I've got this great spot and I think you should look at it and I'd like to sell it to you. Let's talk about it." And instead of having to go visit it in the field, he can get a first look within a couple of minutes, really. and look at this XY and say, oh, is there any hydrothermal alteration there? You think you have a porphyry deposit. Well, I know how to tell if there's something for a porphyry deposit there. And he can literally get answers in a few minutes. And, he can do a whole processing workflow to do an interpretation of what is compositionally there. Once he knows how to do that within an hour kind of thing. So, this is unheard of. I would spend weeks and weeks doing this in the past. So this is a game changer.
You and I have to go over to the Investors Exchange after this interview. I need some good advice.
I have been known to follow people around with a computer before. To help them, It's like, come with me.
So, I do want to talk about ESG, and it was mentioned earlier because the whole concept of remote sensing, people are still trying to get their heads around how this will help our industry, because this is a huge challenge for mining, is the environmental challenge, and whether it's tailings dams or whether it's other things. So tell me about how these applications can help the industry in that regard.
Yeah, so look, the main benefit of remote sensing is its remoteness, right? You don't have to actually have boots on the ground to be able to assess something effectively. And for our mining clients, especially some of our major clients who have assets distributed, all over the place, often in very hard to reach areas, often legacy assets that are not sort of getting as much foot traffic as they maybe had in the past. They want to be able to monitor them effectively and make sure that they continue to be structurally sound and that their rehabilitation plans and programs are progressing, as they intended to and as they communicated to external stakeholders. And so remote sensing gives them a chance to actually monitor things really effectively. And economically, frankly, by having sensors that sort of go back to look at the same site every 10, 12 days, depending on the sensor. Now we have ones coming daily. So that's sort of the gist of what remote sensing brings to that class of problems. We have a couple that we've done that sort of handle more of the infrastructure risk and stability risk, and then also the vegetation side of things. So one of our products is called our Global Deformation System. It uses Insar data. Are you familiar with Insar data?
I'm about to become familiar with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll give you the non-technical version of it. Of course, you got it. So Insar stands for Interferometric Synthetic Aperture Radar, which is one of those, it's a mouthful. But it's one of those active source sensors that I mentioned previously. So instead of using, reflected energy from the sun, it's actually that the sensor itself sends out a signal and gets something back. And between subsequent revisits over the same place on Earth, the satellite, if it's got like a very stable orbit, is able to see whether the ground moved relative to the satellite's position.
Yep.
And to see whether, there was subsidence or an inflation or a tilting or anything like that.
And how often, you mentioned that you're in the process of getting to daily, or?
Yeah, not for Insar, for some of the,
some of the other sensing.
For more of the multispectral and hyperspectral data. Yeah. Well, multispectral, really. It's getting to be daily. For Insar, we tend to work most commonly with Sentinel-1 constellation, which is
12 meters.
Yeah, every 12 days. Every 12 days. Every 12 days. There is also higher resolution data available from commercial providers, which can be as often as every 3 days. But that's really something that we recommend only if, it's a very at-risk site. Otherwise, every 12 days is probably about right. Yeah.
I listened to this. The ICMM guidelines that have come out recently are most mining companies find not the real-time guidelines onerous, but the legacy, like the long term. How do you do that after the mine is finished, after 100 years into the future, and the things you're talking about? Anyway, I don't know a lot about tailings, and I don't know a lot about this, but there seems to be a match there in how mining companies could comply to those guidelines, certainly some of the guidelines that are a challenge.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We have a lot of case studies that we've looked at of incidents, unfortunate incidents that have happened in the past in the industry. And, you know, sometimes, there wasn't really a precursor signal where you could have known something and prevented it, but oftentimes there is. And that's, so we're really trying to help and promote safety in the industry.
Yeah. Your technology, is it new? Is it different? Are there other, I'm in the contracting business. We've got
Yeah.
lots of competitors, but often companies have a differentiator, something that is unique.
Well, for our remote sensing offering for mineral exploration, a lot of the processing over the last 20, 30 years and has really been using Aster. So Aster is a satellite that was put up in 1999.
Just ask.
Aster, ASTER.
Okay.
And it is a multispectral sensor that has data over the visible to near infrared, the shortwave, and the thermal, those 3 wavelength ranges that I talked about for mineral mapping.
Okay.
It is multispectral, so it has tens of bands. And it's really been the workhorse of mineral exploration at the regional scale for a long time. What we have that is a differentiator is that we built what we call our bare earth composites. So we took the entire archive of Aster data, as well as the Sentinel-2 data set, which is offered by the European Space Agency. And we built a bare earth composite that we can use to map mineral composition on the surface of the earth and made that data analysis ready. We picked the data that had, it has the least amount of vegetation possible. It doesn't have cloud. As much as possible, doesn't have snow. So geology doesn't change too much. And so we can look at that entire archive and pick the best pixel, correct that data set so it's in surface reflectance and mosaic it and spectrally balance it so that we have this analysis ready data set. So that's for multispectral processing. What really makes us sort of our new things for that is that we've been offering this for a little while and we've already proven that it's very popular because of the speed of being able to do the analysis. So in order to sort of make that available to even more clients, we have a new junior mining offering for that, where we're going to be able to do more automated production of some of the results for that and make it available over smaller AOIs at a lower cost to make it more accessible to some of our junior miners. That's one thing. And then the other thing that we'll be doing that really sets us apart, I think, is we built this new dynamic compute capability on top of our existing supercomputer, which is already amazing. And we're able to bring in these new hyperspectral data sets that I talked about, which have hundreds of bands.
I just saw hyperspectral come. That was my next question. It just came up on the screen there.
And we're able to process that data at a blinding speed. It is just really phenomenal. We have an example data set that we have over Broken Hill, which has 87 flight lines of airborne hyperspectral data, high map sensor, 3-meter resolution, so quite small pixels. And if you would take a traditional desktop software and process each of those flight lines, it would take you about an hour to run what we call a SAM classification, or a spectral angle mapper classification. You're looking at doing what's the relative abundance of this particular mineral and unmix your data to do that mapping. So we're able to do the entire 87 band data set in 6 seconds. 6 seconds. So that means that you can think about what's my next question on composition, and chase this idea, chase that idea.
So how long would it have taken you to do that historically?
It would be at least an hour for each flight line. Each one.
Yeah, and that's you could say it takes you 87 hours, or you could say, who has the time for that?
Yeah.
That's the other.
You wouldn't actually do it.
Would you
it's
even
so
do it if it's so prohibitive? That's right.
Yeah, and in fact, those are the data sets that are sitting on the shelf that people haven't been able to look at. And that interpretation has not happened.
Because it's too labor intensive or too much data. That's what we talked about.
Yes.
Yeah. There's too much activation energy to even get over the hump of wanting to do that.
Yeah.
You have to be really committed. which people can be, but very often people are really busy and they don't. They're juggling a lot of priorities. They have tight schedules and deadlines, and it's just difficult for them.
And sometimes they don't have the skill either. And so that's something we bring to the table too. We teach people to how to use this data. We support them. We help them be effective. We help them get to their solutions.
Yeah.
That's part of
Well,
our
that
job.
comes back to what I say, choosing in data overload. You need somebody that knows to be able to help you with what data really matters.
That's right.
Yeah. We have specialists on staff, and that's our job. That's part of my job. That's part of our other spectral geologist job. Yeah, Sam.
Yeah.
That I work
Sounds
with.
like you've got a company that's combining cutting edge technology with a depth of knowledge. I'm
That's
not
right.
pointing to each of you as I say that, but that's the impression I get from our discussion.
No, you're totally right. And going back to something you were asking earlier, none of the techniques that we're using are our own. I mean, these are all like well documented in scientific literature, right? They're techniques that have been used for a very long time. Like Laurie said, the Astra sensor has been around since 1999. But what we're really just improving is the speed and the accessibility of those techniques. I think Laurie said to me maybe a year ago that she had assessed more areas of interest with Marigold than she had in her whole career prior.
Absolutely
And so by now
true.
it's got to be double or something.
So when I see a particular deposit type and I see that kind of I know exactly what to look for. I know what bands it's going to be in, and I know I have a very, very good experience about, just from looking at so many deposits, about what that alteration is going to look like and what products I need to do to find it. So, the speed that I'll find when I'm looking at something, I can really help guide our clients to get to that space very quickly.
Well, I can picture the amount of data coming in and it being exciting I'm on a couple of boards, being exciting to mining companies. But if you don't know how to use that data, and I wonder, you've spent the time in your career to learn, like from the ground up, no pun intended. But when you start getting all this information quickly, if you don't have that experience, it can probably be dangerous. Maybe not.
I think more. It depends.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because we see all these people that have these lottery terminals, right? That are they're betting and they keep hitting go. It's really interesting because if I get a geologist and I teach them how to do this, and then I open this opportunity up to them with Marigold, what I find is that they just can't stop looking. Once they figure out and get some confidence about what they're looking at, it's just like a lottery terminal. It's like, oh, I'm doing exploration and I'm being successful and I'm looking at this deposit and I'm finding what I know is there on the ground because I've been there before, and I'm getting confidence in what I'm doing, and then that confidence builds into opportunity and success. And we see it again and again and again.
A lottery terminal. I'm picturing a slot machine. You
It
pull
feels
it
like that.
A geology
there's the
slot
next
machine.
deposit.
Sometimes I have to I have to stop looking. I have to go to bed.
Also our clients do ground truth what they see in the software out in the field. So they'll go and they'll say, hey, with the remote sensing data, this is what we think is going on. That gives us an idea of where specifically we should be looking when we're out in the field, and then collect hand spectra or other kinds of samples, and then go back and compare and sort of iterate that way between the remote sensing data and the field data. And so that also helps prevent them from going down the wrong path and misunderstanding something.
Yeah, and we help them support to do that properly as well, so that we always have to think about, well, what will the sensor see? That's just really, really important. My colleagues and my clients that we're working with for ground truthing, they're very used to hearing me say that.
So we've talked about exploration. We've talked about some applications with environmental and social governance in terms of there's going to be a huge number of applications for this type of technology. I mean, we're in a mining conference. We're talking mining, but there has to be a lot of applications for this.
There really are. The mining industry is interesting. So remote sensing has been a part of the mining industry for a long time. And so there's a lot of people at this conference and at our clients who are familiar and
understand it, can have buy-in already.
Yeah, that's exactly. They've collected this data. They're already acquiring commercial surveys over areas of interest for themselves. So there is already a history and a fit over there. Yeah. And a lot of our major clients especially are very cognizant of this, the environmental impact of their work. And so they will also work with them on things like, understanding what was the environmental conditions of a site before they got involved, so that they can have a baseline to compare to as they, plan for the end of the life of the asset. And then even, sometimes to win the right to work somewhere by saying, hey, I understand this site. I know its history. I can, we can be better than others at being stewards of this site over the long term. And then also, at the end of the life of that asset, we work with them to monitor how is the vegetation growing there that they planted, and make sure that they are able to meet the expectations they set with their stakeholders.
The reality too, though, is I often say this, as geologists, the vegetation's in my way, right? But for other people, the vegetation is what they're looking for, and then what they're looking
That's
at.
why I go underground.
Yeah, well.
But
right.
yes, I know exactly
but
what you mean.
and I'm very well aware there's soils applications, agricultural applications. People are trying to map vegetation species or crop species or forestry management or coastal mapping or all kinds of different applications where this technology and our ability to be able to process this data quickly could be solutions for them. And we haven't even tapped into that yet. Like we have work to do to try to say, hey, we have this capability, we have this technology. Is this something you're interested in? Can we help provide solutions for you? And as climate change becomes more and more important, I really think that is going to be more important too. And we have a place in this world to contribute to that, which is, I feel good about it. I care about the earth and I care about the future of our planet,
Well, you introed with that. How you got into the business. And I love that because if people sometimes see mining as part of the problem, but I see us as part of the solution.
Oh, I completely agree. Yeah.
They say if you don't farm it, you mine it. So we need each other.
Yep.
Yeah.
No doubt about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask each of you, is there something that you want to leave with our listeners or some final comments?
I would say don't be intimidated by our technology. Embrace it. Come talk to us. Come.
Are you talking to me personally?
No, well, sure. I'm happy to show you a demo of Marigold anytime.
It's very
no,
good.
I mean to anyone who's interested in the technology and says, hey, do you think it could help me? Come and talk to us and ask the question. And I'm a scientist. I'm really open to talking about how we can help someone to meet their expectations or meet their needs.
I think just the fact a geologist with your experience that will I go so far as to say is in love with Marigold, loves this technology, is a great vote of confidence for the technology itself.
I don't want to go back to processing data the way I used to. I want to process it in Marigold.
You're spoiled now.
I am.
Marigold spoiled
very
you.
Spoiled. Yes, I am.
Okay.
I'm never going to retire.
Some final comments?
I would just say that, I think Lori did say this earlier, but I would reiterate that, we are using tried and true techniques and we are really pushing and accelerating them, but also in some ways where it's just getting started. It is really... it is really just continuing to grow and accelerate. There's more and more sensors launching. The complexity of the data and metadata being collected is really just growing every single day, every year. And we're excited for what's coming and what we can unlock for the industry with all of that.
It's very, very interesting. I made it clear, I think, that this isn't an area of my expertise, but I find this fascinating. And thank you so much for joining us today, Lori, Sahiba.
Yeah, it was great to be here with you, Roy. And I think that you grasped it just really well. So, yeah.
I agree. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to our audience for joining us for another great edition of Mining Now.